Another example of just how mind, body, the whole sense of oneness, okay? At the monastery, for instance, we start at 4:30 in the morning, and we just need to hear you there. And so there's a certain amount of sitting quietly listening to songs, and then we sing a song, and then there's just some quiet time, and that's all over by about 5 o'clock. And then I tend to sit for about a half hour, 35 minutes, quietly in meditation. And I just find those it's dark. Nobody else is in the chapel but me generally. Sometimes it's one other person, but we're all quiet. We're both quiet. And then, after that's over, I go upstairs and I do some stretching, some of which was taught to me by a stretch guru. And so I do some stretching sequentially, building up a little bit. Not a ton of it, but a little bit. And then I go down to our gym. We have a little gym. And it has a rug, so it's got a soft surface. And I put on my tap shoes, because I got a tap next Friday night to help raise funds for the school. So I tap, and I find that now some of it is because you do it on a regular basis, I think. But some of it, I think, has to do with meditating first. Now, you would think, what would tap dancing have to do with sitting in one base for a half hour without moving a muscle? You'd say, wouldn't that be counterproductive? Not moving a muscle. Would thrombosis set in or something like that? Blood clots or a cramp or whatever? Well, no. And then the stretching comes rather easily. And then the tap dancing. And what I mean by I remember when I started out, sometimes I would just come down here, or I'd actually go in the Boy Scout room, because they had a little stage, which has got some bounce to it, which was good on your legs, your back. And I would find myself watching myself and thinking, okay, do this. Where's the foot go now? Oh, it goes back here. Okay, ball chain. And then where's it go next? And you would think it, and then you would do it. And what I did at this sort of sequence at the monastery, I found that, because I only practice 20 minutes a day, every other day. So it's not as if I'm practicing. But when I dance, I do not stop. I don't stop and look at a video. I don't stop and rest. Go consistently. And what I find little by little is I stand up straighter, which some people might say you let your chi flow. And I don't watch my feet. And I don't think where they go. What I might listen for is whether or not I'm scraping or tapping. But I can feel it. And then I say, that's what I'm going to work on. And I'll say, literally, you dance when almost all of you are off the ground. There's certain little points when neither foot is on the ground, when they move you from one thing to the other. And so you move from exercising to dancing. And it comes. And I think just like when you start meditating, it comes. But it only only comes because you practice. And at first, you can think, I'm wasting my time, I can't do this, this is too hard, so on and so forth. All of which I thought at first, when I first started trying to take classes. Because the teacher never talks about that. And I really don't know how people become great dancers. I think youth would help. But I have found that meditation and movement go together. And I had some of the same experience as jogging. But I think that, and I'm at 8,000 feet, but I think the jogging is easier because of the dancing. I just think it's a great exercise. But I think now of meditation as an exercise. Because we're not just body people. And we have to exercise all of us, all of ourselves. And we're taught about physical exercise, and taught about the spiritual as spiritual. But we're not body-soul. I was brought up with body-soul. There's these two separate things, and one's inside the other. We're just one. And body-soul is maybe a metaphor, trying to explain ourselves, but I think it's a fiction. But I think that my experience is we're one. And you need to work on both. And if I were to, for instance, if I were to walk into someone who says, I invite you to join my class or something, one of the first things that I would look for in the first class, when I went to my tap dancing teacher, it was that way. The manner of the person. I don't want to know just what you know, let's say academically. Because if you are not being transformed by what you do, then I'm not interested in you being my teacher. And I was told that the dance instructor that I was recommended to me, he's 84. And he was dancing on Broadway in the 30s. So, but that he was very good for teaching newcomers basic steps. I didn't know what a basic step was. I just know I wanted to tap dance. And I liked him, and that's what kept me coming. I took 6 lessons. Then I went off to the monastery. I had other things I had to do because it's Saturday afternoons. So we still teach it on Saturday afternoons, but it was something about Gene that I thought, this man is at peace. He's comfortable being Gene. And I think that his whole teaching came across from that. And that was my experience of him. And of other people who have said, it could be a chiropractor, it could be Pilates, it could be whatever. What do you like? No, I don't ask you what you like, I just watch. I listen, and I'll come back. And I'll say, this person can help me because they're being transformed. Is it because of their Pilates exercise? I suspect they do other things. I think that, I'm not saying everybody is who's able to use, I mean, obviously some people have great talents, physiological talents and gifts, but I think they're helped and moved along by their inner work, however they do that inner work, that allows them to access all of themselves. And then I think it comes out in their bodies. And so I just was thinking of that now in terms of people say, well, how do you think you'll do? You know what? I think I'll do just fine if I practice my spiritual stuff on a regular basis on a Friday. It's a Friday night from 6 to 9 p.m. I'll do just fine. I'm not worried about it because it's not all about the dancing. It's about me. And, I mean, you move your body a certain way depending upon how the energy's flowing. And to me, God is energy. And that energy is always within me. And I get it stuck when I'm full of fear. When I'm fear. And the other issues would be security, control, and esteem. And those are the three things that Thomas Keating talks about. And I think Ron does. Security, I don't have enough security. I don't have enough love, esteem, and I don't have enough power and control. And if those are the things I think you end up, maybe not directly dealing with, but when you find out, here's a way of looking at this. Near the end of what I finished with was your heart. Get your heart. Get heart-centered. When you get, something bothers you, all right? The first thing that comes, well, I don't know if it's the first, it comes from the heart is the emotion, the feeling, the bother, the energy of, and it combines with the thought in your head of the issue that bothers you. Somebody did this. And we're focusing on somebody did this. And how do we either stop thinking about what they did or fix them or fix this? So that, because if I fix this or do that or stop thinking about it, all mental, then I'll feel better. From a more meditative, contemplative dimension, and it's got various tentacles, ways of doing it. Mindfulness is one of the terms they talk about. In centering prayer, it's the welcoming prayer. And what you say is it's the energy coming from the heart center that is really what you deal with, not the issue that happened to you, or that somebody did. Because that's an issue that happened and is done. One. And two, you probably can't change them. And often you can't change what's done. You learn to let go of that heart energy. And for instance, in centering prayer, they say, welcoming prayer. You welcome it. Wait a second. What's that about? Why am I welcoming it? Well, what I've learned, at least in most situations, what I've learned is it usually has something to do with power control, security, or esteem. It's usually one of those three things. And so I welcome the feeling that says, what are you telling me? Oh, this is my esteem issue. You ignored me. And it's all about me. Why does this bother me? Another person couldn't be bothered at all. This is coming from way long ago in my upbringing, in my life. You know, a huge history, let's say, who knows. Any case, let it go. Thank you that it came to remind me, oh, this is your issue thing. Let it go, in other words. Don't hold on to it, which is all what centering prayer is doing. So that's one of the things centering prayer is doing. It's helping you to learn to let go of so much stuff that you let control your life. So it's that prayer of letting go. And I just heard someone talking about it yesterday. They said they had gone to some psychological mindfulness session, the therapist, and so on and so forth. And says, oh, I didn't say anything. I said, this reminds me, as they were talking, I said, this reminds me of the welcoming prayer. I said, it's the same dynamic and the same kind of thing. So just something to keep in mind of how I think this meditation will just have more and more to do with the rest of you. And I'm not talking too much about the word contemplation, because I think we can meditate, But contemplation is a gift that you may come from moments in your life. That's that non-dual reality. It may be moments, it may be flashes, but it's not something you can make happen. That's why I think there is another energy or force that I'm working with. It's not just something I make happen, so it's not a control thing, which is why I have to keep letting go to allow it to happen if it's going to happen. And now and again, it does happen up in the monastery. And I sometimes walk away and I said, I wonder what I did to make it happen that time. Can I repeat that? Well, that's just me thinking that I'm in control. So I talk about just deep in the meditation. But in our tradition, what Maharishi Ji would call meditation from the Eastern tradition, we would call contemplation. The contemplative dimension of the prayer life. The sort of the non-dual. So Jacques, we can keep with him too, never listened to me after I spent 3 months in the monastery. This is too much going on. So he says one of the things that comes out of his practice and then his view is love. And he says it's a love that is selfless. And it looks out for the other and never oneself. And I said, oh, I think I've heard that in my gospel someplace. And so how did he get there? And I think it was the more inner work that he does, that it gets him to selflessly looking out for the other and never oneself. I mean, that's really pushing an idea of community. It's not, how can I help you to help me? How can I help you to make my life better? At least you're helping somebody. But gradually it deepens to where it becomes totally selfless. Or we might, in my tradition, we might say, pick up your cross. But if it's love, it's a love, so it's not done, oh, this is really going to hurt me, but it's a good idea. It comes out of just a connectivity with the other that draws you to be concerned about them and less concerned about yourself. So, looking back at something like century prayer, and Thomas Keating's idea was what is intention? Intention is key. What the heck is your intention when you do this prayer? To feel better? To find a parking place? To beat cancer? No, your intention is for the presence and action of this divine mystery, this totally real. And so it is, in a sense, selfless, because you don't really know what that intention is. But I mean, that's faith. You're open to it, and hope. So Ellul has this idea, and then of selflessly looking out for the other and not oneself. And so he looks at modern capitalism as he saw it. Modern capitalism is how he says, you use labor. Well, he uses labor. Well, the owner uses labor to obtain more wealth, not for the labor, but for the owner. And people, the worker, if you will, they are simply a means to an end for the entrepreneur, the one who owns the business. And he felt that this was Europe between the wars of the 20th century. That was his vision of Europe. He's not talking about the United States. We have our robber barons, and I mean, I could look at that and say, oh, well, that's kind of familiar. In other words, people become a source of something so I can have more. Over against some commonality of meditation in which more is the one thing you let go of. I'm not looking for more. Where somebody said that there's a movie about Ram Dass that's at Dairy Center, and the title of the movie is Become Nobody. Become Nobody. Well, talk about self-esteem issues, or esteem issues. Go from, if you don't pay attention to me, I'm going to have a terrible day, to where become nobody. And Ram Dass is anything but nobody. Actually, he lives over in Hawaii. Come on. So, but he had a stroke. He's had a stroke, so he's, come on. He can't move around much. But he still exudes love. As for people who seem to see him. I guess go see the movie. I don't think I'll get to it. But, so, you got this issue of people are simply sources to help me get more. I just want more. Whereas the more contemplative dimension of prayer is less. I want to drop or not pay attention to my ideas of God or the holy or whatever, and drop my ideas of, for a moment anyway, of what I'm supposed to be doing or being or so on and so forth, and just be here now for 20 minutes or a half hour or an hour or whatever it is you do. And out of that, you will not see people as the source of you getting more, because more no longer is a big issue for you. It's not where you're going. And I think this is kind of the ideas behind blessed are the poor in spirit. And we think of poor as poverty, because we grab a term when we're this dualistic way of thinking, and we quickly translate it into economic terms or things, because we cannot see any other way of looking at it. They're wisdom sayings, but you can't access the wisdom saying until you can get to a depth of wisdom, and then something will speak to you. And I think that's, so when I see something that I don't understand, rather than try to figure it out, I said, wait, it'll come to me when it's supposed to come to me. And before that, it just becomes one more conundrum that I'm not able to access because I'm not there yet. I'm not ready, if you will. So Ellul said, he calls these unethical working conditions. This would be, I mean, a lot of religions would say this too. But what you're seeing is people who can say they're part of a religious belief system in their heads, but can use people to get this more. And when you get into a deeper meditation world, you see that this isn't making a whole lot of sense. And it seems like one of the challenges of capitalism and religion is how to have a religious depth so that capitalism doesn't become what he saw in between the wars, which people like Marx back in the 1850s and 60s was looking around and he's seeing this stuff then. I mean, think of what it is 70 years later, and saying that this isn't working. This isn't a good thing. I think, I'm not sure I have the whole story. One of Karl Marx's children died, and he didn't have enough money to bury him, something like that, and he couldn't get very much sympathy. In other words, Marx didn't start out as, he's not as atheist or anything like that. And he said, this ain't right. So he personally was affected. And I think that's one of the things that gets you looking in a new direction and a new way, is you personally experience a phenomenon rather than just read about it. You become someone who is actually affected as well as affected by a system that doesn't pay attention to your suffering. And so he came up with some new system. But of course, if you don't have, how did it get from there to Stalin? Well, it probably wasn't Marxist communism by the time it got to Stalin. It was Stalinism. And I remember we called it Stalinism. I just thought, oh, isn't that communism? I don't know. Why did I know that as a kid? It was Stalin. It was crazy. And just got rid of people. He used people to get what he wanted. And what did Stalin have? Fear. What did Stalin want? Control. Power. It's just taking those three things and seeing how you can max them out as he did. So, unethical working conditions are supported by people who purchase their affordable goods. Oh, now you're talking about me. And we're hearing about that today, aren't we? I mean, Ellul is speaking to the modern, he's speaking to the postmodern world. The working conditions that are still unethical in what we might call third world countries, I don't even know if they're third world, well, do we support them by purchasing these affordable goods? And I look at myself and I said, so when I read this, I said, oh, what's this shirt that I got on? Where was it made? Ah! So I found out, yeah. It starts redounding back, and it'll begin to bother you. And I think one of the ways that we'll move to, yesterday a lot of young people are, they're not mystics, but a lot of young people, they all took off from school, and it's a good thing to do on Friday, I guess, a 3-day week. But they're traveling in the cities and all over the place, and we got to do something. We got to do it now. This is going to affect us. Them, much more so than a guy like me. But I think that I'll get more sensitive to it. Again, this becomes, these people become my neighbors even though I can't even see them. And I said, what can I do? I can't do anything. I can't do anything about the governments. Well, why don't you look at who made whatever you made, and where'd that come from, and so on and so forth. And you start hearing about some people saying, well, we have to be more ethical. Is everybody meditating? What's going on? I don't know. But here's Ellul bringing this particular thing up but he feels that the Christian God, you know something about that, he said, is made known through Christ on one level, but he says this God of Christ is also hidden. That is, it's not as accessible as you think it is. You can't just read about it and have information. You could read 400,000 people crossed the Dead Sea at night as it was parted. Okay, you got information. That really going to change you very much? I don't think so. So there's something about this God that is hidden behind the stories and the language and so on. So I think there's a certain amount of letting go to access. So, for instance, you can read about, in my tradition, you can read about Jesus Christ. We're going to read about that. Well, I'm going to read the four Gospels of what we call the New Testament. It's just called the Christian Gospels. Okay? So we read about these four Gospels. There are four different ways of looking at this same person from different perspectives. So there's no need to try and reconcile one story with another. We're not trying to do history here. We're trying to access the really real. So I read about that. Then I have to practice a certain amount of letting go, which is what I do in the meditation, which I said is something to do with moving this higher action, lower contemplative. Just let go and just let the information be and let it work on you without trying to think about it so much. You begin to move into a meditation. Lectio Divina is what we call it. But and then something of the hidden will be revealed to you. Let's take it away from this. You're going to go for a walk in a garden or a wood, okay? And we'll take this time of year. And you go walking, this is a nice path and so on and so forth. You go walking and you're thinking about things, pondering things and so on and so forth. And you get to the end and someone said, how was that? Oh, it was nice. No, it was out in nature. Another person goes and walks pretty much right behind you, pretty much the same time of day. And they say, did you see that flower, that fall flower blooming? Did you see that red leaf? No, I didn't see any of it. I'm all in here. I can't connect. I'm not open at all to what's going around me, much less what's going inside of you. So I mean, that's a little bit of the way to do it. It's not just saying, I'm praying. What are you? You talking or worrying or asking or whatever. Not that those are bad things, but they're certainly not the depth of it. So there's something about letting go after you've got the information of, okay, there's trees and there's flowers. Well, if I don't let go, I'm not going to see any of it. I'm not going to see the depth of it. And I won't get any inspiration. Okay? So, he says the center of the Christian message for him is hope. He said faith for us is more about dogma. Having the correct religion is often what faith is about. He asks people, what do you believe? And they start telling you a bunch of theological statements, if you will. Or the fact of something that they read. It's historical, something, whatever it is. But it's all about stuff. He says it's hope that you can, hope in what? That you can actually make a difference through physiologically taking out time to do nothing in terms of seemingly nothing. In terms of meditation, when somebody looks at you, you're not fixing the world. And the hope is that that's going to lead to making the world around you a better place. Or as he says, concern about your neighbor selflessly. That's a pretty big leap. But it's the hope that that'll come. In other words, there's a power in the message. It's in the Christian message. I don't think it's a unique message, by the way, but he says in the Christian message, there's a power there. And you can access that power not by just saying, I'm going to do it. My willpower. It's not going to work. So the contemplative is one who waits in hope. As she or he abandons their agenda or abandons themselves and allows this God to sort of rush into the darkness, he puts it, rush into the darkness of God's silence. Now he's trying to put words to his experience. So I'm going to abandon my agenda, which is a century prayer would be letting go. Abandoning my agenda. That's the hope. I can do it. What's going to happen? My hope is I abandon my agenda. Instead of trying to get what I want, I stop focusing on that. Abandon my agenda and allow then, and the hope is, God, however you conceive of that, rushes into what's now a darkness, that your eyes closed, of God's silence. It doesn't become your silence. Your silence is sitting down and not making noise. That's as silent as you're going to get physiologically. God's silence will can begin, and I have experienced it, and many people have. It's a different kind of silence. Very different. One of the things I like about the monastery is how little sound there is around. As I'm teaching now, there is a buzz. It's because we have big power sources right behind this wall. And if I open one of these doors, it'll really get loud. But it's consistent. And up there, you don't hear anything, it seems. Really, really quiet early in the morning. But so God's silence is God's silence. God makes another kind of silence. You become aware of it. So there can be this. Oh, just stop. Oh, thank you, God. Okay. There's this, he calls it indefinite waiting. That is, it doesn't have a time frame. That's letting go of your control issues. Indefinite waiting, but perseverance and constancy. Thomas Keating says the only mistake you make is don't do it. I love a prayer that says there's only one mistake, don't do it. God will take over, he says. The divine, the really real will take over. Just make your effort to practice your little way of doing it. So it's perseverance and constancy. And he brings up, then he goes and he brings up the wrestling. And Jacob in the Hebrew Scriptures, Jacob, one of the sort of founding fathers. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, those three. So Jacob wrestles with God, if you will. Well, what the story says is Jacob is out someplace. He's on the run, as a matter of fact. And he's afraid that his brother's going to kill him or something because he was duplicitous. So it wasn't as if he was a really good guy. And he lies down on this rock or on the ground, taking a sleep out in the middle of nowhere. And then he ends up wrestling with an angel and wants to know the angel's name. I want information. And the angel isn't going to give him any. And then he kicks him in the hip, and so Jacob from then on has a sciatica, let's say. And so, okay, so there's a story. Well, that would be what you would call metaphor. It's a story trying to explain up here in the head the experience that he had. Was it a dream? Well, it doesn't matter whether it was a dream. Well, he did have a hip issue. What mattered was he had an experience without drugs of the divine, and he wrestled with it. But he struggled with it. He worked with it. It wasn't easy, but he kept at it all night long, if you will. He didn't give up. And it began to change his life. The result of this encounter, wrestling with, changed him. Physiologically as well. And began to make him more of who God made him to be. And there'd be many people in the modern world says, I'd rather just be a jerk without sciatica. I just want to feel good about me, with me. So, again, it's a constant, it's an everyday thing. It's not necessarily an easy thing, but you keep at it. He said, if God so wants it, then be with the dark night. Oh, John of the Cross. Be with the dark night of no apparent results. If God so wants it, there are no apparent results to you in your way of judging what happened. So Thomas Keating would say, never judge the prayer. The prayer itself is simply, is not necessarily that's going to get access to God, because that's just a control thing. The purpose, the main purpose purpose of the prayer is to get out of the way, to allow God to do God's work in God's time, which means a lot of that work could happen in your active life. That during the day, something comes up and you sort of come in a different way. Something else happens. You pick up a sense of oneness with something, someone. You have a compassion you didn't have before. You have an empathy. You have a patience. That kind of thing. But what seems to be in the prayer is just bleh, or what he calls a dark night of no apparent results. A lot of people say, oh, I'm meditating because I heard about Ram Dass meditated. I hear he's just become love. Everybody wants to be with him. That's what I want. I want everybody to be with me. I want to become love. And they'll all want to be with me. Because right now I have no friends. And I'm lonely. Well, that ain't going to work. So it's got to be more selfless. So your daily intention is to allow the presence and the action, however that's going to be, of this divine energy. You'll become more connected with the world around you in the rest of your daily life, little by little. So there are prayers that one says from a deep emotional place, that deep emotional content. For instance, in a hurricane or an earthquake. God, spare me. So that's a prayer that comes from deep within us. Honest, emotional. Earthquake stops, hurricane passes, I don't change. I've seen a number of people who said, my neighbor roof blew off and I'm safe. I said, did it change your life? Well, I got a roof. Yeah. That's it. That's about all it is. That's called foxhole prayers. Foxhole prayers do not change you. They're sincere, they're deep, they're focused, but you don't grow up. I think that's what he's trying to point out. And he says that he talks about a treason against faith. So do you want to talk about faith? Not just in dogma. Treason against faith. That the faith that there is this force that will act in your life if you kind of get out of the way in your meditation and allow yourself to be changed, become more selfless. So he says, here's what the treason is. A feverish activity of the world. That is, it's all up to me. Well, what's the problem? Why shouldn't it be all up to me? Well, if it's egocentric, it's not going to be good. It can't be egocentric. Think of it a little bit damaged goods, okay? A little bit damaged goods, and we need to be kind of rebuilt. So, what we're looking for is, this talks about our prayer of hope is a victory over apparent nothingness. What seems like apparent nothingness. And what the world offers is busyness. He says, and what this prayer offers seemingly is nothingness. I sometimes sit here, nothing's going on. Good. Good. Because that means in your head or your wherever, nothing's going on. But something's going on, and it will become apparent in God's good time, if you will. But the world's apparent busyness ends up with people who say, I have no time for meditation or prayer. I'm too busy. Which is busy with what? Ego, fear, control. Those kinds of things. He feels that deep prayer, what we've been talking about, this deep meditation, is trying to get out of the way, let go of your thoughts, let go of focusing on your thoughts and your agenda. he says, it will demand participation in society. And he says, he uses the word pious, I believe. This is where the pious often drop away. They will do more egocentric prayers and not become involved in society. That's somebody else's job, or it's not my job, or something. They disassociate their gathering together for their worship with a concern about making the world a better place. Well, what would better be? Well, if they would read their scriptures, it would tell them what better is. In our case, Jesus would talk about what better is. And what happens is you get this selfishness in the everyday, the economic, the social, the political, and then you get this churchness in which you have all this different language about caring and love and so on and so forth. He says, but deep prayer won't let you get away with that, because deep prayer will begin to push the edges. It will demand participation in society the way he said it, which I think was, your care for the neighbor is selfless. It'll get to that. It's not what's in it for me. So action for him becomes a function of prayer. So he takes the active, contemplative, if you will, and he says, you can't have one without the other. It would be silly. You would know. So how do you know that this prayer is working at all? I don't know. I said, well, is your life beginning to change? I think that's one of the things Keating says. If he didn't say it, I said it, but I think he said it. Is your life beginning to change, and how is that change coming about? And I can see that in my own life over a period of time. It's slow, but your life will begin to change, and you actually will become more like these, whatever your scriptures are, whatever you read about that sort of lifts you up and says, I'd like to become more like that. Or, I wonder if I can be like that. Well, that sounds, I'm attracted to it, but I can't get to it. So your actions is a function of your prayer. They work together, which is why I think the prayer needs to come early in the morning before you start getting involved in people's lives, so that the energy is coming from a better place, not so egocentric, but more selfless. So, therefore, prayer becomes radical in the postmodern world, his world, and certainly prayer becomes a radical response to daily life. Not my agenda prayer, but this deeper meditative prayer. It becomes just part of. It's a radical way. People say, I'm a radical. I say, well, what's that mean? It might, so you got, your hair looks different. You wear different clothes. It's so many exteriors. And two things that I found. One, it doesn't last very long. It just moves on. And two, it's all about externals. And three, it's often very selfish. Now, the same person can wear certain clothes and live certain ways, and none of those negatives would be there. So it's not the outside, it's not the outsides that make the big difference. It's not only your response, where the response is coming from, and how that response is coming. And but it can be a very radical response. Think of Dorothy Day. There's one jumps to my mind. Who met this fellow, Peter Maurin, who was French, by the way, French. She met him in 1933. So Ellul was 12, 22, 30. He was 21 at the time. Peter Maurin was much older. And Peter Maurin comes to the United States, kind of vagabondy guy, and he's got these ideas. Well, where did he get those ideas? Well, he had this interior life. You know, the French people are thinking about stuff. how to make this world more human. And it certainly wasn't working with European capitalism. He knew that. And so he comes up with these ideas. But he doesn't have the wherewithal. And I think this is how the dynamics of spiritual force, the energy, the really real works. So he's got this thinking that's developed out of his own prayer life, his own spirituality. He's got these ideas of the communal way of living. Dorothy Day has the wherewithal to pull it off. So the two come together. And he becomes her guru, if you will, in terms of things. So they have, and they also kind of stumble a little bit into it. They think they're stumbling, but it's really being presented to them. All of a sudden, because it's 1933, this recession, there are people standing outside with nothing to eat. Oh, why don't we do something? Why don't we do something about this? Since the government wasn't doing much. As a matter of fact, if they had been doing, if something had been going on, maybe they wouldn't have the recession that they had. So, any case, so they start serving soup. But they also decide they're going to live in community. And it's going to be a community of sameness. It's going to be a community of simplicity. It's going to be a community that will gather together regularly and talk from the heart about our own spiritual growth and our response to the world as we see it around us. And the third thing was they were going to have a farm in the country where they would grow a lot of the produce that they would then bring to the soup kitchen to serve in the soup, fresh vegetables and so on and so forth. So this is how some things begin to come together, and you get this small community. They still exist all over the country. You have these small communities who are trying to live out a communal life system of service to others, and for someone like Dorothy Day, based upon prayer and meditation. Now, she was a woman who said a rosary. She went to daily mass, and she did Lectio Divina. And so she would ponder the Gospels and say, what is it saying to me? Much like St. Francis of Assisi. So it wasn't as if she was sitting for 3 hours a day in contemplation, but she had a way of letting things get inside of her in her meditations, and then she would respond, and then she would challenge the people living in the community to live this Christ-like manner, regardless of whether they went to church or didn't go to church. Because how are you living ethically? How are you living with one another in this house, which we're all sharing, each with your own little rooms and so on. So that's just one way that it can happen. So prayer is radical, he felt. And deep prayer results in action, not just busyness, if you will. Because busyness, I think what he means by that is, or activity as he calls it. I call it busyness. It's all about me. And busyness is often based upon fear that only bad things will happen unless I take control. That would be the helicopter mob nowadays, for instance. Okay. So he says, too much activity loses oneself. You've got to have this stepping away. So at the monastery where I stay, before we go to work, manual labor is what it's called. Before we go to work, we pray. So that we'll bring a certain attitude to the work and a certain trust that things will work out all right. And one of the reasons, by the way, that they had manual labor in monasteries, Benedict's idea was because you had rich and poor. Again, he was trying to bring more of a what we call socialism dimension to it in the 500s. Marx would have liked this, I think. So he brings together the rich and the poor are all going to live together in the monastery. The rich don't work. Remember, you would see this in Abbey, what's the word? Downtown. What is it?
Downtown.
Yeah, that thing. The rich don't work. That they're called gentlemen and ladies. They don't do anything. Other people work. So now and that they had that from Roman times. Yes? Confession is in the church.
There's nobody there.
They'll be there soon. It starts at 11:30.
Oh.
Okay, you're welcome. So, he says everybody's going to work, and that's how we will keep everything in common. There's no workers, non-workers. And that's why they did manual labor. Also, farming and ranching, I guess, was their main industry. But that was his idea. Everybody would work alongside one another, no matter what your economic status was. And the prayer life would all be done together by everybody, so on and so forth like that. At least that was his idea. It got kind of skewed over the ages, but I think we've tried to bring it back. Well, now you don't have this non-working thing as much, but that's the way it was. So we was trying to break down that culture of separation. And what Ellul thought is this unbridled capitalism was making separations. And everybody says, well, everybody's got a fair chance. Well, a lot of people said no, including Marx. And so you were having the rich and the poor. And many would say today, we're losing our middle class. Are we going in that direction? When you go in the direction of a few rich and mostly poor, will be revolution. Revolution comes, and